but they matter deeply. Let us continue to come together to ensure that everyone who calls Rochester home feels safe, valued, and respected.
Thank you, council member. With that, we will move on to our agenda. We have Mr. Josh Johnson to present the Chateau Theater operating model and investment direction. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, Josh Johnson, working city administration. I'm here to provide an update on the operational report that we received and also get some feedback on the Chateau. So we'll jump right in. Chateau's approaching its 100-year anniversary. Over those 100 years, it's seen a lot of different chapters and acts in its iterations in its life. Now I'd say we're at another inflection point where we're at a point where the current lease expires after the end of 2026. And out of courtesy and respect and transparency for her and her booking and operations, as well as trying to understand what investments we should be planning for and operational goals we should be planning for, we need to take the bulk of 2026 to start planning for that. So that brings us to why we are here today. We wanted to put these up just so council can start thinking about the questions and the feedback that we'd like towards the end of the presentation. But these three requests are: one, feedback on guiding principles. We'd like to get some input to frame the strategy or create a decision framework for how we should be coming back to you with another more big plan, if you will. Also, the operating model and capital funding support. So the consultant identified three different model concepts, and we'd like to get some feedback on which concept resonates or which one do you think is more feasible to proceed with. And then the third one is to provide direction on potential operating partner. That will help us start planning and working with an operating partner to start analyzing and understanding what needs to be done from their facility needs perspective. These are some of the guiding principles that staff put together. We utilize some of the guiding principles from the prior RFPs. They're more strategic, or I'd say they're more aspirational rather than tactical. But these are the principles that we've used to sort of identify what we're prioritizing in a potential funding model and an operating model. But these are meant to, or we would like to get feedback on if these are the right, if they resonate, or if you have other suggestions. The Chateau timeline. So the city purchased the Chateau in 2016. We purchased it for $6 million. That included a $500,000 contribution from Mayo Clinic. The rest of the $5.5 million was paid for through using DMC funds. In 2018, we issued an RFP for an operator. In 2019, we selected the first operator. And during that operation, we also spent about $1 million in roof repairs, interior repairs. When we first bought the Chateau, it was a former bookstore. It still had the second floor and it still had an escalator in the middle. So we've come a long ways since we purchased it. In 2021, we issued another RFP for Chateau operator, and then in 2022, we came to an agreement and a lease with the current operator, Threshold Arts. During their time, we went through a full HVAC replacement and a complete bathroom renovation and added 2 more bathrooms. That brings us to today where we're talking about the operator analysis. So this just goes through the investments that have been spent on the Chateau to date. As I mentioned, the $6 million. There's been about $4.4 million in capital improvements. As I mentioned, the roof replacement, HVAC, restrooms, those were also primarily paid for using DMC funds. And then operating costs, our holding costs, they've been reduced over the last couple of years because of the new HVAC. So annual electrical and heating costs are a little under $50,000. But if you take, it was more expensive early on to operate it because of the outdated infrastructure. It's about $80,000 per year. For a total investment of just over $11 million in the Chateau over that 10 years. Through those 3 years, we've had a proof of concept. We've had a very successful and strong activation. I want to give a lot of credit to Nora and Threshold Arts. Through those 3 years, they've had over 100,000 visitors through the doors. And that occurred during times of a lot of construction and HVAC replacement, the bathroom renovations. She's had to do a lot with little. It's been improved over the 3 years, but to start, she didn't have a stage. There wasn't fixed lighting. There wasn't good audio, and we've incrementally improved that. Also, just the diversity of events that we've seen. We've had everything from Latino Fest to dancing downtown to the winter market to high school students playing entrepreneurs during the pitch program. So a huge diversity of events. I just also want to call out that in no way are these findings from the report or our recommendation a reflection on what Nora's been able to accomplish. She truly has put her heart and soul in there and has done a lot with her own two hands, I should say. So baseline facility needs. No matter, once I go through these 3 operating models, each model requires the same baseline facility needs. So facilities team commissioned a facilities report in 2024. And a couple of the items that need to be done are the exterior enclosures. So that's tuck pointing the brick facade, making sure the building is enclosed. We did replace the majority of the roof, but that copper section on the very front still needs to be replaced. Interior preservation, we did have some water damage, so we have ceiling and stucco in the lobby to repair, and other miscellaneous items like elevator maintenance, just maintaining the HVAC and fire protection and whatnot. The report estimated that at $1.8 million. I'd like to acknowledge that that's already 2 years old. We also need to have historic preservationists come in and give a more detailed quote on things like interior preservation. So it's a baseline number to get us started, but that needs more vetting. So that goes into the context of the study. So we've known over the last couple of years and learned a lot from the current operator, and also working with other teammates like the facilities team, Civic Music, about what needs to happen in order to improve the functionality and the operation of the chateau. But we also wanted to go out and get an independent study to identify what the potential funding strategy, operation strategy, marketing strategy could be. So that's what we did. We went out. The consultant is a 30 years of experience operating a very similar theater in Minneapolis, and she created these 3 potential models and renovation plans for our consideration. These are the identified gaps. Just to note that these are the gaps identified by the consultant in the report. I won't go through all of them, but a couple of ones that I'd just like to call out specifically are one of the main things is having a fixed or more robust catering program. Right now, caterers have to come in either pre-made food or have heating trays and then serve all the food in the back. There's just very limited. We have basically a counter, ice machine, and a fridge. So to really be competitive and more financially sustainable, we need to have better catering and better food and beverage infrastructure. Also, the capacity. So that's going to come up multiple times today. The really limiting condition right now for the capacity is really the emergency exit. We need 3 emergency exits. More analysis needs to be done, but with one of the models, we think we can achieve around 800 occupancy for certain events. And then just operational readiness. Liquor license continues to come up. In order to be financially sustainable, liquor plays a huge role in that. We're still working with the state to get a carve out for the chateau to have its own liquor license, but we feel like there's some other options that we might be able to get around getting a liquor license in the facility while that's working through its process. And then just other things that are deficiencies, the acoustics need to be improved. We need more permanent stage lighting and all those elements. Here's the operational concepts. So I just want to identify that each model is incremental or increases from the first one, or it's additive, I want to say. So Model 2 includes everything in Model 1, Model 3 includes everything in Model 2 and 1. So the total estimated cost for Model 3 for all of the work would be $5 million. The first model is really stabilization. Oh, do we have a
Mr.
question?
Johnson, can you hold for a minute? Councilmember Miller.
So question about this. This report was received at some point a few months ago. Have these numbers about estimates been vetted in any way locally? I mean, are these doable numbers as we look at these models for construction?
not additionally from the report itself. So these models are based off of the consultant's experience with renovating and operating, like I said, a similar theater. So she took that and then right-sized it to the Rochester market. But all of the costs need to be further vetted. I mean, even like I said, the baseline 1.8 million facilities cost, we had a contractor come in and provide all those costs. But once you start dialing in terms of like, what's the cost of putting in a new catering station? Does that catering station need in the basement? What's the plumbing and electrical light to get to the basement? So I would say everything that we discussed today are high level, but it gives us a starting point.
Okay.
Mr. Yetzer, you had something to add.
Thanks, Council President. I think Josh answered it well. All I was going to add is I think it's important to keep in mind that there's 1,000 variables with each of these. And so it's important to look at these through the lens of this is how one person, one report looked at improvements. And so certainly as we progress, we would want to fine tune these. So I would not go to the bank with any of these numbers. This is to sort of wrap your head around a model, a concept. And then we would definitely need to fine tune these once we receive a little bit of direction because there's just so many options on the table at the moment.
Okay. I just wanted to get that out on the record up front because I think we have a history of consultants providing us optimistic financial projections.
Since Councilmember Miller opened the door, that was my initial reaction to these numbers are we creating expectations in the public that we can do this for 3 million, 4 million, or 5 million? And so what confidence do you have going in? Should we just throw out these numbers? Or when you go back after this session, are you going to give us real numbers? Because as Councilmember Miller said, we don't want to create false expectations in the community that we can do the all-inclusive for $5 million.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I would hesitate to commit to any of the numbers on the screen and just state that we are bringing these in front of you to try to put some concepts on, get your mind thinking of that. Once we receive some direction, we would bring a real number back to you once we've had a chance to vet that number with a contractor, those sorts of things. This is the numbers that were in the report that we commissioned, and that person is not a contractor. So I would want to do more homework ourselves before we married ourselves to a number.
Councilmember Palmer.
Well, I think Mr. Schubring said it nicer than I could ever say it or would say it. It's hard to see numbers like this and not have the word draft on it because what's going to happen in 6 months is that someone's going to come to me and say, you're going to fix the balcony and put an elevator in for $250,000. And I'm not an elevator guy, but you can't do that. And so that's really, it makes us into a hard spot when we see stuff like this and not be able to defend it. Because as you know, our last effort with a consultant was horribly wrong, and it's been a headache for all of us here at the City Council.
I do think it's important to note, though, that some of these things, like the elevator, like the roof, like the interior repairs, were vetted in that facilities report back in 2024 by Kraus Anderson. So there are some that have been vetted, but some of the things that the consultant specifically recommended to get to the 3.7 to 4 number have not been vetted. So there's a mixture of both.
Your 2024 numbers, they've guaranteed those, and we can plan on those.
I'm not saying they guaranteed them. I'm saying they vetted them to ensure that that's an accurate number for what we asked for at that time.
And part of it, I also say, is right sizing what we think is necessary for this facility. I mean, we could spend tens of millions of dollars on the facility if we wanted to, but what should we prioritize? And that's also what we asked the consultant is, if we have a budget, let's say it's $5 million, how do we prioritize the necessary changes that make the biggest impact in the facility up front? Because we know that money's not limitless, right, or unlimited. We need to establish some budget and then refine those numbers as we figure out an operating model. So thank you for those questions. Just to give you a brief overview of these. So the first model is really stabilization. So it's keeping the current occupancy, but making some minor improvements like a permanent fixed stage. Currently, our stage isn't even ADA accessible, so we need to like rent a ramp in order to make it ADA accessible. And then other things like we have temporary light trusses in the middle of the room, just makes it wonky and funky for operating and events. Model 2 includes everything in Model 1, but it also starts looking at enhanced backstage production capabilities. So that's that, a more robust catering kitchen, more fixed food and beverage stations in the event space, as well as looking at how to get that occupancy to 800, around 800. And that, again, is really contingent on that third emergency egress. And then model number 3, all-inclusive. I also want to note that the all-inclusive model is the one the consultant is recommending. City staff is recommending Model 2. And in the report, the consultant also recognized that Model 2, if you're not going to go with Model 3, is also a very viable option. But Model 3 includes the all-inclusive option. Biggest changes here is there's a daily cafe, more usage of that skyway, and that would require some type of personal lift or staircase in order to get people up and down that. So that would require much more analysis in terms of the viability of that. And we also looked at the cafe. There's a lot of benefits in terms of organic marketing, getting people through the door, event awareness, daily revenue streams. However, that also carries more risk, more employment, which I'll show on the next slide. And we also don't want to compete with other downtown markets. So we sort of looked at that and decided this is not the right model for this space. So we're recommending Model 2. This is just a side-by-side analysis of the things I just mentioned. Again, the revenue projections, high level. We need to determine what is the operating model and then dive deeper into those numbers to bring them back at a future study session or city council meeting. But the one thing I will note here, going back to that FTE, Model 3 suggests 45 to 55 FTEs, which it's a difficult workforce, and it's just a whole different operating model managing that many FTEs and that many daily operations.
Mr. Johnson, can you just as a baseline give us what Threshold Hearts uses as far as the FTE in their current model?
Yeah, the current model, they had, towards the end of 2025, 3 full-time FTEs, and then they utilize part-time services for certain events. So
it could add up to that 6 to 8.
yeah, I would say I'd say Nora would be ecstatic to have 6 to 8 people to help with events.
He's nodding, yes.
Yeah.
Good.
So this just goes into the why the Model 2 compared to Model 1 versus Model 3. Model 2, the biggest thing is really trying to increase that occupancy. And when I say occupancy of 800, that doesn't mean 800 for all events. That's the maximum occupancy for certain events. Other events like dance halls have a higher ratio of lavatories and fixtures than, like, let's say a wedding or or those types of things. So anyway, that all needs to get vetted. Also, we believe Model 2 will establish a more long-term approach rather than these small incremental investments into the chateau. We would really like to take the time at one shot to make these improvements so that whoever the operator is can hit the ground running right away, and then we can get out of their way. We feel like Model 2 has more benefits than Model 3, much to the points that I was making of we don't need to invest in a full commercial kitchen. We don't need to invest in the workforce to operate a restaurant every day. We don't need to compete with the local businesses. We feel like Model 2 has similar advantages, but without the unnecessary risks. The other thing, we feel like Model 2 is more of a complementary use than a competitive use. Do we have another question?
Mayor Norton.
Thank you. Before you go on, and we're talking about these models, I guess I'm wondering how much involvement our current operator had in working with the folks, because if you look at even the small group of numbers that you showed at the beginning, a lot of those are free events. And so I'm guessing, and I'm wanting to know, they've been generous enough to try to activate the building with very little staff and compensation for folks working there. Are we looking at all paid, or are you still talking about 50% free events with this new model?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that's exactly the kind of feedback that we would like to receive. And that kind of goes into what are the guiding principles? Like, how much do we want to have, daily free events, or just daily visitors walking through the facility to look at it. Currently, on that slide for activation, I believe it's 50% were free. Is that the right ratio? That does require a bit more subsidy and less revenue generation, but I think we would like feedback on how we should prioritize that.
And I appreciate that. And I'm worried about these numbers for that too, about self-sustainability, if in fact they give away as much free use as we are now, and if that's what we expect, and I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you.
It is act for a warming shelter during social ice and other events downtown. So the doors have always been open, and that's been a huge benefit for downtown. So I think we need to find that balance. This just reemphasizes some of the benefits or model number 2 outcomes. What I want to say here is, as we were going through this, and we've had a lot of discussions through the past year of like, what should the strategy be? Who should the operator be? I mean, there's a plethora of options that we can think about, but there's always that chicken or the egg scenario where do we make improvements, kind of if you build it, they will come, and just hope that whoever the operator is can utilize those improvements to the best of their capabilities? Or do we select an operator and then go out and make improvements, which then delays our timeline and causes other problems. So what we did is we sort of went through this. We looked at the venue restoration, the catering potential, the operational capacity for an experienced operator to market it, to book events, to ticket, and to manage it. The event flexibility, like how do we make it flexible so we do have local arts groups so we can have an occasional wedding or a corporate event. And then just a balanced experience of blending the heritage with a modern guest experience, but also how do we ensure that whoever the operator is maintains the same level of customer service that we would expect as a city of Rochester? So through those conversations, it sort of occurred to us that we may have someone underneath the city umbrella currently that can offer all of these aspects. So that brings us to the one roof concept. So we already have a facility that does events, it does catering, it does marketing, it does promotion, it does downtown, experience and visitor bureau type stuff in their booth. So what if we approach them, and the city did approach Experience Rochester and asked to see what would their interest be in potentially collaborating as the operating partner. Some of the other advantages that we see are efficiencies and reducing redundancies. So they've already got furniture and equipment. They've got the tables, they've got the chairs, they've got the scissor lifts if we need those for putting up an event. They also have the workforce to put things up and take things down after event and cycle through. They also have internal marketing. They've got the ticketing experience. So it seemed like this was the logical, strategic recommendation from a council perspective. Just a couple more advantages of the one roof. It'll allow us to solve that chicken or the egg problem where we start working with Experience Rochester. And I would just want to say right now that we have not had robust conversations. Those have to come in terms of what does the operating model look like, and we need feedback to sort of make sure that our collaboration is mutually beneficial. But we wouldn't need necessarily an RFP process, so we could start working with them now so that we can, in early 2027, start making those capital improvements so that, early in Q2, potentially, we have someone operating the Chateau again. Also, there's a lot of synergy between the Mayo Civic Center and the Chateau. If you think about conferences and events that happen at the Chateau, they often want to have offsite happy hour or events for vendors. Mayo Civic Center can manage that calendar to make sure that when the conference comes that they have that availability and just sort of more spin-off events and revenue. Like I mentioned, they can coordinate all the bookings. There's that cross promotional, there's that joint city customer experience and service. So this brings us to our next steps. As I mentioned, we would like to get feedback to select which operating model you feel is most sufficient so that we can do more analysis, vet those numbers, and then create a plan for construction bidding and then bid advertisement and potentially construction in 2027. Confirm the programming and use priorities, going back to the mayor. What have they changed since we put out the RFP back in 2021? In 2021, a lot of the priorities were keeping the door open, diversity of events, free events, things like that. So is that the right model? Define the capital investment and funding strategy. So, we need to understand like what we feel like the funding strategy is so that we can go back and create the funding capital stack to put forward, but also would like recommendations on how you see the funding strategy. And then finally, just establishing the overall project timeline. When do we expect to come back in front of council with another recommendation, more vetted recommendation? When do we look for creating a lease or operational agreement, and what is the construction strategy? So with that, unless Ryan, I forgot anything, we'll take questions.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for bringing this before us. I know about 9 months ago, we said we really like to see kind of three models: a maintenance model, a medium set model, and then a more fleshed out model or all inclusive model. And so my initial set of questions had to do with the financing and really making sure that we're not setting expectations for our community. Overall, I believe that the Chateau is a unique facility. It's a jewel in the middle of downtown. I also believe that it does, with its location, really speak to the initial objective of the Destination Medical Center, which is to create that experience outside of the Mayo Clinic facility in Rochester. So there's tremendous amount of opportunity there, and I also do like the one roof model, the Experience Rochester. I have some questions on that, but thank you for bringing it to us, and I'll listen to my colleagues and maybe have a few questions in the at the end. Councilmember Fredericks. Oh, I thought you raised your hand.
Yep.
You raised it for him?
I'm going to keep listening.
Okay. Councilmember Palmer.
Well, thank you. On slide 6, if you go to slide 6, you have what your goals or what you think that we're going to end up doing. How's that not being met now?
Are you referring to the guiding principles, Price? I to your point, I think they are being met. I think, as I have already said, I think Nora's doing a great job activating the theater. To inject another, amount of funding into the building. We do understand that our partners are going to require a long-term strategy. Threshold Arts has been a great, I would say, interim strategy, and they knew that was an interim strategy. And I'm not saying that couldn't be another long-term strategy, but we need that feedback. Otherwise, we just need to determine who to work with in order to create the long-term funding strategy.
Okay. And I didn't realize how much DMC has contributed to this building, and we need to thank them for that because it's a huge amount of money.
About 95% of it, yeah.
About 95% of $11 million. The other question I have is this partnership that you could do with Experience Rochester. We've got the Arts Center, which is under the one roof. Mm-hmm. How often is their commercial kitchen used? How often is that space being used with collaboration with Experience Rochester?
It's a great question, Councilmember Palmer. I might look for a lifeline.
I don't think we have the answer to that off the top of our head, but we can certainly do some homework on how often they're tapping into that partnership.
I mean, if they were at 105% or 95%, I could see, well, maybe venturing out, doing something differently would make sense. But to me, keeping them in the one roof and trying to get that to really work well, and then using a chateau as something separate is kind of where I'm looking at. The problems I have with the study that was done, and it seems odd to me, but it almost looks like it's generic or cookie cutter. It's like I just took it off the shelf and we'll add Rochester. They're talking about 30% of corporate use. I'm not sure where you'd get 30% corporate use in Rochester.
Yeah, and the consultant was just looking at what are the market dynamics for our local market, and I would say that each of the different funding models would have different outputs in terms of percentage of usage. That was sort of the middle outline of corporate events, and that doesn't just include like corporations. It just means like more private events. So that's the model that she felt was sort of that sweet spot, I guess, for our market. But that doesn't mean that that's what we need to aim for from a local.
But she also puts in there about wanting to be a coffee shop and catering. Did we have a market study that we need more coffee shops downtown?
No, we would have to do if we thought that was the right direction to go, I would recommend having some type of retail, restaurant, coffee shop market analysis. We have not done that. I think that's just looking at the market that the consultant operates in, which is even a more competitive landscape than Rochester. It's just a way to differentiate your building and create other revenue streams.
So at Mayo Civic Auditorium, if I want to do catering, let's say I'm going to have an event there, I have a list of caterers that they cater for me. Versus at the Chateau, is it my understanding that almost anybody can be a caterer there?
There's a preferred list, but I believe that whatever the event person hosting the event can select their own caterer. I do know that there's good experience and not so good experiences where the current operator will guide people on where they think they should go with the caterer, but it is open.
The sound system you talk about, the sound bar, that's supposed to be hung from the roof. I know that we have an estimate on that. Do you know what the cost is to raise that up and get the floor to be bigger?
Yeah, we've done, we've engaged, I'm not gonna remember the engineering consultant, but an engineering firm to help explore what the current load is on the roof. It's been a bit perplexing on trying to understand, like after we added the new HVAC and with the other stuff where we're at. So further analysis needs to be done with that. I know our facilities team, Zach Wood, was managing that, would have more information, but it has been a challenge getting a definitive answer on can the roof support X amount of additional weight.
Okay. And then the mezzanine upstairs, we're not using the mezzanine. It seems like a pretty simple fix to that. Why aren't we exploring that prior to this report?
The mezzanine in the front or the mezzanine in the back?
In the back.
Okay, yeah, the mezzanine.
Well, the back is at the front of as you walk in.
Skyway.
Skyway mezzanine?
Skyway, let's go with that one.
The challenge there is we would currently, without egress or ingress off that mezzanine area, we would need to establish a agreement with an adjacent building in order to allow us to use their stairs, elevator, escalator, bathrooms, which is an option. We can continue to explore that option, but it's kind of a stopgap in order to make it fully functional.
But, I mean, if that's an agreement to get to use that space, it seems pretty simple to go to one or two buildings and say, can we have this agreement? I can't imagine that they wouldn't want people walking through their facility. So that seems to me to be kind of an easy thing to fix.
Yeah, I think you're right during business hours, but non-business hours, security becomes somewhat of a concern, but we could continue to work, yeah.
Okay, and then the liquor license. It's confusing to me why they need to have a separate liquor license or why they can't borrow one or get one or need. I know we're trying to do it through the state. I don't really understand how the state's not allowing us to have a liquor license there.
Yeah, I've met with Mr. Cartwright probably a dozen times, and it's still confusing to me. So the easiest answer is to have a special carve out like the theaters and event centers in Minneapolis and St. Paul have, so that the Chateau itself carries it, and it's regardless of the operator, it stays with the building. We were close last year during the legislative session. Unfortunately, some other things got put into the bill and it didn't go our way, but we're continuing to look at that. Otherwise, how the building's being utilized or classified dictates what type of liquor license it can even be, it could even apply for, which are all things that need additional infrastructure. Like if you need to sell food in order to sell liquor, then you have to have a oven and a fridge and plumbing and everything else so that you can do that. Otherwise, you have to have off-site caterer hold a liquor license, and then you're sort of beholden to them, and all of the liquor revenues are going to that entity. So it's just walking out the door.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Keen.
Yeah, thanks. I sent some input to staff today, but I'll try to summarize here. But I have just some high-level things. I do like the way you organize this into gap analysis, like what should it be and where are we at? And I think that does help people understand it. The same with operating model and the simplification of options A, B, and C, even though as we're talking now, there's also the old Bree study, and then there's also the other operating model of what we've been doing. I think underneath that, though, and I just want to say it straight out, a lot of this work came about because we needed a plan for how to go forward before DMC money should flow to this again. And I think the problem with the current operating model is when you come up to a $1.8 million bill, there's nobody to pay it. And what we're really dealing with here is who's going to finance this, and is it going to be financed through running it as a business and not in the community events that it's been done before? Is that really the question in front of us?
Yeah, I think you summarized it more plainly than I did, but I wouldn't disagree with any of those points.
Okay, because that's how I'm looking at it right now. That I actually was really confused going through this because I thought we were actually making some good progress on activation and some of these goals that we drive. Community center, downtown activity. Those things are starting to happen. They're not the kind of things that are going to fund a $2 million project, though. And I think that's the core of what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and that's how you prioritize it. Is it a community asset that we're okay with it generating a loss, or are we looking at least a break-even point?
Yeah. And then when you're dealing with these old buildings, we've had other downtown businessmen here telling us they're expensive to maintain, and we have this now. So let me go over to your 3 points of feedback on the guiding principles. It's awful hard to be against the guiding principles when they're preservation and activation. They're good high-level things. They're just hard to come to balance. And I actually, too, I was kind of appalled going through some of the things in the recommendations when they start, 40 full-time equivalents. These sound like crazy numbers to me that if it is something that I have to sign up to agree to those, that just can't happen because that's just not a realistic view of what could happen in the Chateau as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of the numbers I looked at 7 years ago for the exhibitors, that they were going to, $14 million. It was just nuts, and we just walked through it. And I don't want that to happen again. Your second one is operating model and as far as the capital stuff. And again, in this case, I think the simplification is the enemy, because in this case, I too am worried about the outside groups looking in and saying, oh, good, we can do this for this amount of money, and then we're going to have this. And I don't think this has been vetted well enough on both the expense side, but even more so on the revenue side. I oversimplified here to say something like, oh, if you instead of giving us 1.8 million, you give us 2.9, we can get this many people in there, and now you're going to be making this much money every year. And it did not ring true. It seems the city is happy with the activation right now. Is when I say city, I mean both what I hear from the council, but also the staff when I talk to people like RDA. But I think that does bring me back to the question, but that doesn't pay the bills. And we don't have a way to pay the bills unless we either make the decision up here to say we want to activate this and try to figure out what's going to cost at a reasonable rate. And that's going back to the operating model. I still think that should be one of the options more than it was listed. I think you've said it already, but let me ask on the operating model. Was the assumption when you start talking about what the revenues are and things like this on option 1, 2, and 3, was it that the operator has its own liquor license and that is now part of the pro forma? That was the assumption?
That's the assumption, yep.
Okay. And then direction on operating provider. I really did struggle with this because it's a city report coming to me that says, here's an option, but I didn't get any feedback from that provider. And I see a very different mission of what's going on at MCC. Not all, I mean, I know Experience Rochester is bigger than MCC, but I didn't know if this was a different mission for them and was the assumption it was free. So I didn't know how to respond to that. I know the staff is coming back with the middle level investment feels right sized. And I'm glad we've had this public discussion about this idea that we don't want to communicate these numbers as engineered numbers. We want to talk about these as this is not even 10% like vetted. These are just things to help guide. This is a method that the staff is using to draw opinions from the council so they don't want to go off on a path that we're not going to support down the road.
Absolutely. And I think, there could have been different strategies, but showing you a 10, 15, $20 million budget estimates also didn't feel good. I think we're trying to figure out like, where's that somewhat middle lane and get feedback from there.
Yeah. As far as then I'll just listen up. But both the operating model and the provided direction is, I think what we're trying to solve for is how do we upgrade the building right now, and whether that's the 1.8 to $2.5 million. That's the problem at hand. And I think the way we're trying to do it is through these different operating models. But I guess I want to open up the discussion that maybe there are other ways to solve those problems.
Councilmember Wall.
Thank you. My questions have more to do with the longer reports than with the presentation, or perhaps most of the questions offered thus far. When I first started reading and said there are going to be 3 options, I expected a much wider range of options than, say, 2.7 to 5 million. Those are pretty close in cost. Whatever happened to that like $20 to $40 million dream that would completely alter the chateau and restore it to some magnificence of the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did provide the consultant with all those prior reports and studies. So she was aware of the $20 to $30 million proposal, I believe it was. Without any prompting or any guidance from the city, she felt that was overshooting the mark and unnecessary for the amount that you would be receiving in return. So creating an addition, creating, I forget what they were called, but movable stairs for different events and theater was, I don't know her exact terminology, but I'm just going to say the word overkill for what we could invest in the chateau and still make it operable and activated for a variety of users and events.
Okay. So going back to the report itself, is it common for the city to take one person's experience, 30 years worth, one person's experience and base a huge project off that one person's experience?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's one input in 100 inputs. I think, I don't remember if it was Ryan that said it, but there's endless possibilities. You could ask 100 people what they wanted to see in the chateau and you get 200 different responses. So it's just one, I'd say it's one report that acknowledges or rather, I'm not blanking on the word, but it sort of tells a story of what we've already heard from the current operator and other users of the chateau on things that are necessary to happen to make it functional. It's the more strategic goal, not necessarily the aspirational goal.
Okay. So the report itself, the long report, not your presentation, just created more questions than answers for me. It had comps, like 12 comp theaters, mostly in bigger cities than us, with no figures attached, no data. So, I mean, what are we comping on? It talked about competing venues here in Rochester in the high 20s without identifying who those venues are. To go back to one of Mr. Palmer's points, I thought it just kind of plucked percentages out of nowhere that under this model, 45% will do this, or 50, or 25, or 30. The report more read to me like a business venture that I'm not going to quite say plug and play, but didn't give me confidence, which brings me to my final point. You and others have talked a lot about the fuzziness of this. It just seems to me like this is going to be a boatload of work for staff to try to come to any kind of real numbers and possibilities. I think, like Mr. Keene, I would certainly love this to carry its own weight, so it would not be any kind of call for public funding. Certainly we subsidize many things in the course of city work, but the city needs to agree that that's a value for the city. I like your presentation a lot better than I like the report. I just don't know I don't know. I'm just frustrated with that, so I'll stop there.
Councilmember Fredericks.
Thanks, President. Before we talk numbers, Josh, do we have a clear use for the space?
Other than how it's currently being operated and used, I mean, that's sort of our, as I mentioned, that's the case study to date, but we don't, and that's what we're really looking for
Okay.
feedback on.
So you just said other than what we're currently doing, is there anything wrong with what we're currently doing?
No, I mean,
So why spend $2.5 to $5 million?
If I could chime in here, I would just say, again, the main reason I think that we are looking at this is what is a model that is self-sustaining and sustainable. And so that's really what the investment we hope would bring is increase the type and the ability to have venue or to have experiences that make this model self-sustaining. And again, Josh said it well. The current operator has done outstanding, and that doesn't necessarily mean the current operator couldn't also do that. But we do need to at some point establish some path to bring back a lot of what you folks are asking about of how would you use it and what are the real numbers, and you can't do that unless we make some sort of push.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is it's being subsidized right now at what level?
Yeah, if Josh, if you could go back to the slide if you want, but about $80,000 a year.
$80,000 a year.
Yep.
Well, that sounds a lot cheaper than trying to recover out of $5 million. Because I know how government works in business. It doesn't work real great. And it's obvious. I mean, we kind of laugh about it, but it's true because a lot of things get involved in it. And I think business is best left to private entities. And, you know, we haven't even discussed, you know, it's unheard of in the private business sector to have somebody do a full build out for you and say, here you go ahead and rent it for this much a month, and let's hope like heck it works. I mean, that is a rotten plan. So having a clear directive for the thing, I understand certain things are subsidized, like if we're gonna provide public use of the space for free and stuff. I get that. If that's the direction we're gonna go, then we have to have clear direction what that's gonna be. But in the business world, the way it would work is somebody would sign a long-term lease on that and build it out themselves. And if we want to be nice to them, we can say, hey, you don't have to pay rent for so long to cover some of your costs. You know, that's an option. And there was a private business ran out of there that I believe was profitable for quite a while. I know the whole business landscape out there has changed a lot, especially in the retail world. But there is options we're not talking about. We have we have one option on the table dressed up three different ways. That's what we have. So it's just, in order to put money into something, we need to have a clear directive where we want it to go.
yeah, and just to respond, I think those are all valid points. And, you know, to the point of the current operating model, if there were to be a long-term lease, and not to speak for Threshold Arts, but I believe there's still a base level investment that would need to happen. We can't have a temporary stage, temporary lighting, you know, poor acoustics for another renewal for a long period of time. So I'd say even Model 1 is the minimum that you can get away with. On top of that, you still need the $1.8 million of baseline investment. So you're still looking at a sizable investment, even to continue operations as they are going today. To your other point, totally agree. Whoever the operator is, we need to sit down and work on an operating and lease agreement where the build out is acknowledged, who's paying for what are the lease terms, what are the revenue sharing parameters, all those things, and that would need to be, you know, worked on through this year to bring back for some type of lease agreement.
And if I could just add,
I think over a 12-month period, if we only have an $80,000 shortfall, I feel with a little tweaking, we could come up with a way to get that to stabilize.
Councilmember Miller.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the presentation and the opportunity to have this discussion because I feel like it is a little more cohesive than we'd had about 9 months ago. So I think we're moving forward. But I guess to comment on the first point of feedback you're looking for, what I see in our council strategic priorities and foundational principles is this idea of inclusive decision-making. I see many downtown stakeholders including those who host events and program that space beyond Threshold Arts here today. And I don't necessarily get a sense of what they would make recommendations for as stakeholders in downtown. And I think we have made that really clear in our last year's discussion of strategic priorities that we want to hear from the community and we want these to be community-centered. I see those points in this list of priorities or vision for the Chateau Theater, but I don't see it in this presentation, and it feels hard to make a recommendation about an operating model when I don't feel like I have anything other than what the consultant gave us. And I will note that she's not here today, which feels a little odd that she's in Minneapolis and not here to answer some of these very questions that we have about her process. And so I feel like I don't necessarily have the trust to rely on that to give you feedback today, other than to say I still want to hear from the community, and I don't hear it enough for me in this presentation. I think it's reasonable to say we should be able to have an operator be able to program the spaces that exist within the Chateau Theater. So I think it's reasonable to expand the capacity and work on providing egress, ingress, bathrooms, lift, whatever that means, to be able to fully utilize the space, because going in there does feel somewhat empty. And I would agree with the report and some of the comments that have been said. You look at the balcony areas and it feels strikingly unavailable. So I think that that's a no-brainer, and in my mind moves us towards better sustainability financially and also just utilizing the space. And then provide direction on operating partnerships. I'm open to the idea of One Roof, but I would very much like to see them present it. And so perhaps an RFP process is more appropriate so that we could ask questions and vet alternatives, because while I agree with decreasing complexity, I wonder about the complexity of operating two facilities where they're largely operating one cohesive space that has different spaces. But I will note that I've brought up several times that Broadway, as it's currently configured, is a barrier between two parts of downtown, and I wonder how that works with their current staffing and operating models to be able to program a space that's not contiguous with their building and has difficult access points and is a facility that they have not operated before. So I'm curious, but would like to hear more, and am not ready to move forward with recommending that we just lump it all into the One Roof model.
Councilmember Doring.
I agree with many of the points that Councilmember Miller just made, and would seek to have even further clarification before recommending anything going forward. I think that we need to do our due diligence to get actual tangible numbers for those baseline improvements. Whether that's the expenditures of dollars to do that or not, I think is essential for this conversation, so we understand and have a more holistic picture of the financial obligation we're about ready to take on. I appreciate that those numbers were provided in 2024, but the world, again, is different now than it was in 2024 in terms of building expense. I also am troubled by the fact that the consultant is not here to answer questions. Being in that space for multiple types of activities, I am very curious about how the occupancy is going to double without massive renovation. And I do not see that provided in either the full report or in the presentation today. So I have a lot of unanswered questions that unfortunately the consultant here isn't here to answer. So I'm not comfortable stating a preference for a path forward at this point.
Thank you, Councilmember Doring. And I try to choose my words carefully when we're talking about where we're at in the conversations and where we want to proceed to. So we definitely want to proceed with further discussions. In no way are we saying, reach an agreement with Experience Rochester. There needs to be a lot more conversations and community input on the types of programming. I've also heard from the arts community of a fear that it's going to impact our local arts and their access to the space. So just for what that's worth.
Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you. I'm a little troubled with the idea that we have to break even for everything, and I think arts brings a lot to the community, and some of that just a cost that you provide for the betterment of all the community. I think there's a few things that we could do simply, and I think the mezzanine, the liquor license, and soundbar are things that can be handled right now, and let's get that done. I would like to see it just continue with the current operator and move ahead with that. And then I think we should go out for an RFP for a sale of the building with deed restrictions. And I think one of the things that helps us with is if we had a friends group out there that says, let's work with the Chateau Theater. Believe it or not, people don't want to give money to the city, but they'd be willing to give to a nonprofit that's working that. So I think it kind of covers both bases for us, that we can do an RFP that covers most everything that we want. We all know the building's going to stand. We all know we can do deed restrictions. But there are some things, I go back to my original statement, there are things that we can do in the mezzanine, the liquor license, the soundbar that are pretty simple to do, and let's get those done.
Mayor Norton.
I hesitate repeating, but I'm just going to let you know kind of where I'm coming from, and there is some repetition. I think a lot of what I heard and what I read is that liquor license and dealing with the food issues is going to be key. I don't want us to just repeat everything that we have at the Mayo Civic Center where people don't have choices about vendors. I think that's something that's really nice about that facility and something that people really like. So I'd like to keep that option open. And we have to nail down the liquor license ASAP because that's a lot of the revenue. And if we don't have that, it seems, and we can't get it, that it seems kind of not wise to move ahead spending money if we're not going to be able to recoup it. So I had that first. Also, I have to say, watching the community embrace the Chateau as they have has been really exciting to see in the past few years. The community events grow, and those are done at very little cost or free. And so while I understand that we want to break even, and I support that, I also think, and we have a little bit of that already with Experience Rochester, where they give us some events for free. I think the One Roof has some events for free for nonprofits and whatever. I would like to see that kind of model and thinking continue, and not just shut it off only for profit. I kind of like the One Roof concept, but to the points that have been made, we need the community input, and not just the community at large, although, that's fine too. I also think we need RDA and the current vendors to really have a say and explain what they're doing and how they're doing it, so we understand what we're changing from and to. They may have ideas about if this type of work continued, but we could charge this or not charge that or whatever. They have the experience, 3.5 years experience. We need to be having that as part of our decision making. And so two other pieces I just wanted to mention. One is the reason One Roof is interesting to me, and maybe it's adding staff certainly, but also maybe some of the experienced staff that are already there would be a nice addition and partnership rather than starting from scratch. We do have concerns from the music. The folks, Councilmember Doring and I just met with a gentleman. The music, they're concerned that there aren't enough people to keep music going. I think there are. I think we need serious marketing and work being done in that area, and I don't know, the current model, isn't set up to be that. I think of C4 and some of the things that we had in the past, right, where people were together and they were working and there was this common excitement and goal. We somehow have to get that back. And I think the One Roof model has the marketing experience to be able to do the promotion that maybe isn't being able to happen right now and won't be able to happen if we don't have someone super experienced in marketing and reaching people and getting them to these events. So I just add that. I guess I'm not endorsing anything other than, yes, I think we should do more work on this in the coming year. And, maybe 2 is where I'm kind of leaning that model. But I really think there's just more work that needs to be done before we can, I'm hearing at least from the folks at the table, before decisions can be made.
Councilmember Wall.
Thank you. This may be a little bit unpopular, and it may spring off of something that Councilmember Doring said about kind of a massive redoing of Chateau. We hear lots of talk about weddings. I've officiated about 600 weddings in my career. Most of them in churches, to be sure, ballrooms, boats, a frozen pond, maybe a dozen barns. In its current configuration, and here's the unpopular part, I just don't see families or couples choosing Chateau as it is currently set, the way it looks, to be either the elegant place that they're hoping for or the real kind of outside the box stuff, like sitting on hay bales. The whole thing is, boy, why would a corporate client spend $10,000 a day to go to that space in its current configuration? I don't know. I'm sure experienced Rochester would have a great deal more ideas on why a corporate client would come, but I think it's just going to be hard for us.
Thank you, Councilmember. Just a few things. I think what I am hearing both here and in the community is, one, we have in the last 4 years with Nora and the Threshold Arts team really made it a community space, and I don't want to see us lose that. There are opportunities to whether you're there for Latino Fest or Social Ice, to go into the Chateau, see that facility. And I'm going to disagree a little bit with my colleague on that facility. It is an example of an atmospheric theater. It's what we have. It was a leading example of architecture in the 1920s. There aren't that many left, and whether you like atmospheric theaters or not, it's ours. And so I think we need to embrace it. Also, I think there is this sense that even though we Threshold Arts and the community focus has been working and we've been able to maintain it and little bit subsidy, we're really not maximizing its potential as I'm going to say it because it's said in the community, a jewel in our community. And I think what we want to see is getting to maximizing that jewel. And I think what you've given us, even though I agree with everything that's been said at the table here, that the consultant's report isn't giving us a lot. It's giving us numbers that we don't have any confidence in, but it's really saying this is what you could do to get to the next step, and I think that's a good place. I do want to see a little bit more, like Councilmember Palmer has talked about, as far as the capital and what is it really going to look like with 800 seats in there, that facility. I know it had 1,500 seats in the 1920s and 30s. What does that 800 seats look like, and how much of the mezzanine is being used, and are we able to still have the Skyway go through, or does the balcony go above the Skyway? Those logistics, including getting back to the original stage, are we able to use the infrastructure that we already spent for lighting and acoustics and sound? Are we able to move that back to the original stage? So a lot more details on that capital construction project. And then from a operational and maintenance going forward, like I said up front, I do like the one roof model. I think that the organization that we have here in town has shown that they can, as the mayor said, market our community and market what we have. When I think about the potential of the chateau with a base of community, but also bringing in unique concerts, unique. I heard the use of touring Broadway shows. Is that a possibility with that? So I think a lot more thinking, a lot more kind of detail for the council is what I'm hearing. And also, as Councilmember Miller said, I would like to see the Experience Rochester before us to answer some of these questions as far as what that operating model looks like. Is it a 30% community, 20% corporate, and 50% events? Whatever that model happens to be, that is going to be the best to maximize that facility. So with that,
Council President Schubring, if I may, I'm just going to try to summarize what I think I heard so that we have clarity. Because one thing I want to highlight is, I know Josh mentioned it on the onset, but there is some decision that's going to be needed here sooner rather than later. Our contract is up at the end of the year. We do have to make some decisions on whether we continue with status quo or whether we make some construction improvements or those sorts of things. So what I heard, or what I think I heard, and I'm going to look for some reactions here, is to talk with Experience Rochester and get a more sort of vetted how they would utilize the space. Bring that back. I also heard some interest to further understand from Threshold Arts, if we were to extend with them, how they might utilize the space. So that's sort of the majority of the commentary that I heard. There was lots of different
can I
ideas
add
thrown
another
out in
piece
there.
to that? Can you also
Please.
look to Experience Rochester talking with Threshold Arts together? Is there an opportunity there?
Yeah, we can have those types of
Councilmember
conversations.
Miller.
Well, and I'll just add that I also heard and will reiterate that I think no matter who the operator is, they need access to be able to book larger events. So what is that capacity of utilizing the mezzanine and other spaces to increase the building capacity?
Yep.
The temporary stage is not a workable solution for any operator, and we need like a plan, real numbers to be able to fund that. Food and beverage and alcohol are going to be missing pieces no matter who is operating that, and that needs to be fixed. So I think like those critical components to make it a more robust, usable venue, independent of the operator. Like I heard at least some consensus on making a plan for those things and bringing back a recommendation with real numbers for what it would cost. So I would just add that to our conversation here.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have our transit model.
Josh, did you steal the clicker? Oh, is it this?
Rochester Public Transit Sustainability. Go ahead, Rachel.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Rachel Fouch, Interim Director of Transit and Parking, to discuss our Rochester Public Transit System and sustainability over time. So just a brief overview. We have upcoming 3 modes, but 2 functioning modes right now within our transit system. Our fixed route has 36 routes, and that is reduced from our fall service changes with over 650 annual rides. We cover 75% of the city population, and 93% of jobs are within half a mile of a transit stop. We also have Link Bus Rapid Transit, probably heard of it, coming up with anticipated 11,000 rides per day. And our paratransit system, or commonly referred to as ZIPS, has over 50,500 rides in 2024. So really high level, let's just talk about how transit is funded currently. And that is through MnDOT grants, FTA grants and appropriations, and a local share. And our local share is covered by rides, and it's covered by advertisement. So probably the most common way you've seen RPT advertise is the buses being wrapped. And that is our modes of revenue generation for transit. So we are not covered by the tax levy or subsidized by the general fund. So in 2024, the share for MnDOT in our operations funding went to 5%, and that was to help with COVID relief. So in 2024 and 2025, our local match for operations funding was 5%. So 95% of our operations funding was covered through MnDOT and FTA dollars. Our CIP funding remained consistent. That was 20% before 2024. It remains at 20% after 2024. And so that's the acquisition of vehicles or construction projects for the transit department. Effective just a week and a half ago, as 2026 started, our local match has now gone to 15%. And we anticipate this to not be a permanent match either. We anticipate this going up. We don't know when that date is, but for right now, at least for 2026, we know that our local match is 15% and our MnDOT and FTA for operations is 85%. Our CIP, again, remains consistent at 20% for our local share and 80% for MnDOT and FTA funding. So what does this look like in kind of broad, generalized numbers? So if we anticipate or assume an operations budget of $12 million, our local match just a couple of weeks ago was $600,000 and now is $1.8 million. So this obviously impacts our financial outlook for the transit department. So let's just have a quick conversation about why revenue is down. Again, just to reiterate, our local match has shifted from 5% to 15% for operating. ZIP's paratransit is typically close to zero. Sometimes it's covered by the fixed route system and excess revenue. Sometimes it generates a little revenue. This year for 2025, we anticipate ZIPs making a small amount of revenue, but it is not enough to cover their capital costs. And probably the biggest point of conversation today is our fixed route ridership and the efficiency of that system. So as you can see, and this doesn't go back, but in 2019, our ridership was actually over 2 million. And in 2020, it dipped down to just under 900,000. And then it had a steady decrease up until this year, which our ridership has actually increased about 20,000 from 2024 to 2025. So what this looks like in terms of projections, now this is if we do nothing. If not, we do make no changes to the current system, we don't shift how our operations looks. For 2025, we do anticipate going around $500,000 into our transit fund, or our which is at $5.29 million. So we do anticipate going into that fund to cover the cost of some capital expenses for 2025. For 2026, with that shift from 5% to 15% match, it will go from $500,000 to about $2.4 million that we anticipate having to dip into the transit fund for. And we do think we can cover a portion of those expenses with CARES dollars, but those CARES dollars will not be able to be utilized past next year. And then in 2027, I just want to do that because that does feel like a little bit of a jump, but we will start to accrue link expenses in 2027, but we don't have those grants under agreement yet. So some of those link expenses, so we do anticipate that being a little bit lower. But since we don't have grant agreements for that right now, it's reflected as a potential loss. So what are we doing? The answer isn't nothing. We're working for service changes. We already did the fall service changes, which were a big shift in kind of realigning our system, and I'll go over that in a few slides. And we have our spring service changes coming up in just a couple of months. One of the biggest conversations here is collaborations. So what can we do to collaborate internally and externally? So not only collaborating as a transit team, and most of the transit team is here today, but working together to ensure that we're sharing information and sharing knowledge and being a successful team to move us towards the ultimate goal of revenue generating. But also working with other departments within the city. Met today with the library in ways that we can encourage the users of the library utilizing the transit system to get there and increasing that level of collaboration. And I would be remiss to not talk about potential collaborations with Mayo. And so we are entering into a strategic and high coordination for those collaborations, ways to align our goals and in terms of employee access system reliability, and long-term sustainability. We do recognize the opportunity that having such a successful partner and such a large workforce that we can provide service to will benefit our system only. And so we just need to ensure that we maintain and grow those partnerships. We meet with the transit and parking team sometimes multiple times a week to ensure that our goals are aligned. And then finally, looking at our CIP budget, and I think this is a good opportunity. One of the public criticisms transit gets a lot is, why are these buses empty? Why are these buses driving by and they're not full of people? And a lot of that has to do with we don't have the availability within our fleet to reduce the size of those vehicles. And the purchasing of CIP would be adding additional dollars right now. And it's also not a short system. So some of these grants are 1 to 2 years in advance before we'd apply for them. And then the acquisition of those vehicles can take 1 to 2 years. And so when we're looking at shifting the fleet within a transit system, it's not 1 year to the next. It's sometimes 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years in advance that these decisions are made. So we're working with the fleet that we have, but we're always looking for opportunities to be more efficient within that. And one of the ways that we've done that is to take a good look at our CIP budget, which I'll go over in a second. So how did the fall service changes make an impact on our transit system? So we reduced a lot of overlapping of routes. We reduced some of our routes. We also took a good look at some of our stops that had very minimal boardings and departures. Some of our stops were costing the system $4,500 a departure. And so that's not a self-sustaining model. And so we have to be really thoughtful and responsible as we look at that. And so all of these fall service changes have actually, in this 1 month of data that we've gotten, have increased our boardings from 7 to 8. Our goal is 11 boardings per hour. So we're close to that. And so as we look in the spring service changes, we'll be evaluating any of the routes that are performing under 8. 8 is our current average. So let's look at the ones that aren't meeting at least what we're doing on average throughout the system. And that translates directly into a decreased cost per boarding. And so it's our opportunity to really cut back the cost of those trips. And then trip performance has increased. So that's how many trips have been completed, from 97.7 to 99.8%. And you might be looking at this and thinking, oh, that doesn't feel like a lot. That's just over 2%. But that in December, we had 6 missed trips. In October, we had 120. So it's a substantial increase. We right now on a weekday, most weekdays have 536 trips a day. So these small numbers add up over time, but that's why it doesn't feel like a big jump in that percentage, but it is moving in the right direction. So our trip performance for December was actually 99.9%. And then looking at our spring service changes. And so this is going to be where we're going to see a lot of moves in what we do. Like I said, we have 26 current routes. 13 of our routes are currently underperforming from that 8 trips per hour. So we're going to evaluate all of those routes and figure out ways to increase efficiency along them. Maybe it's reducing the amount of stops to increase frequency, or kind of realigning them even further, or evaluating the time of operations that those routes run. Again, address declining ridership. We have to have a reliable system. We have to have a system that people are going to choose over traditional transportation. And how do we do that? We work with our operator. We work with our operator to ensure that the blocks, which is a really technical term that doesn't sound technical, which is when the driver comes in and grabs what they're running for that day, that's their block. And so that block they're not running the 550 for 6 routes. For 6 trips, they might be running the 550, they might be running the 102. So it's a variety of those. So how do we ensure that that is efficient and effective, and use the tools that we have and work really closely with our operator? And so we've already started those conversations with them. And also maintain and enhance our high performing routes. So we know express routes perform well. So what can we do to add more? And express routes are they're not cheap. They're fairly expensive to run. We're looking typically around $1 million to run an express route for a year. But if you have the ridership to support that, you can offset the cost of that. And so looking at the potential of adding some of those routes. But I think one of the biggest things we can look at is transitioning away from this loop system, which will build into rider confidence. So if it's a loop system, that means you would only get on one side of the road. And then the bus goes all the way around the city and comes back and drops off on that same side of the road. So in a two-way service, the bus goes up and the bus comes back down, and it provides pick up and drop off from both sides of the road. And so it's reducing a lot of like that's what you would typically experience when you go somewhere. I know I'm going east, so I'm going to get on the east side of the road. And then if I'm going west, I'm going on the west side of the road. So it's kind of reducing that confusion and increasing rider confidence. It can be overwhelming to decide to start riding public transit. And so what can we do to make that more efficient? But additionally, it will reduce the time that a trip takes. Some of our loop services, that trip is 68 minutes long. And that's not an efficient way to run a system. That means if you get on the beginning and you need to get off close to the end, you're on that bus for an hour. And another thing we're looking at is a reduction of holiday service hours. And this would be like Christmas Day and Thanksgiving Day. Both of these holidays this year, we had 100 rides each around. And so can we look at reducing the hours of operation on holidays, not removing it completely? We still want to provide people access to get to their families and their friends on these important holidays. But can we tighten up those hours of service to still provide access, but kind of cut those dead times off of the ends? And let's take a look at CAP. This is like a really high-level look that the team and I have done, but we've already made cuts totaling over $600,000 over the next 2 years to reduce increasing the fleet and only look at necessary purchases. And so we still have opportunities to cut this even further as we move into 2026, because some of these projects are construction projects. And so we're still at the preliminary phase. And so the numbers reflected are the numbers budgeted, but I think we can reduce those even further. But it is reducing the purchase of new fleet vehicles. This is only representative of the purchase of like fleet vehicles that have reached the end of their useful life. And for a bus, that's generally around 12 years. And again, as I talked, we have to do a lot of planning. So if we were to let those buses expire now, we could be forecasting a 4-year wait to be able to get those buses. So it's important that we can't run a transit system without buses. And so we need to continue to purchase those, but we can be thoughtful on what those are. And another thing we've done is kind of a non-essential software upgrade. We have the ability to collaborate more with MnDOT on software that they have. And so we don't need to make that purchase in the future. So what's next? Radical and innovative thinking. It's something we talk about really frequently on our transit team, but also common conversations that I'm having with our current operator, TransDev. Thankful for some of our union reps and members to be present today to support this, but really focus on rider comes first, but also how can we provide the most efficient and effective service in a way that makes sense for the system. It's time for us to re-release our RFP for advertisement. And so is there an opportunity there to look at a different split on what our payback is for the advertising, or are there opportunities to advertise in other locations, benches, bus stops, and things like that? Incidental and joint usage, which is a really fancy way of saying innovative ways to collect funding in non-traditional means. And so one of the recommendations FTA makes is do you lease a space next to a park and ride location for a coffee shop? And then you can generate revenue from that leased space. And so this is an opportunity that we're actually collaborating with our CAT committee, so the Citizens Advisory on Transit, and working with them to come up with maybe some innovative ideas as they're out using the system in ways they think that we could potentially increase our incidental and joint usage throughout our system. Again, our spring service changes are coming up, and I'm really excited about the things that will happen with that, and really proud of the work that our team has been doing to really be forward thinking and not be afraid of making big changes. And then, as discussed a few times this year, our transit development plan is up for review, which is our 5-year plan document on implementation strategies for the system year by year. And then additionally, our RFP for operations is out right now. And so we'll be executing that operations contract in which a portion of that evaluation is on value add. So what can this operator bring to us that provides and supports our trajectory over time? We had a really successful pre-bid meeting last week. 12 individuals came and 5 different potential operators showed up. So we're enthusiastic about that process as well. And, lastly, looking at a conservative CIP. So the next year is really busy for our transit team. And you'll see us back here for that operations RFP award, the RFP for advertising, and the TDP RFP as well. So are there any questions?
Councilmember Palmer.
There's lots of questions.
Yeah.
So when did you find out about this cost sharing was going to go different?
The 5% increase, we've known for 2025, which is why we implemented the fall service changes as the first step towards making that shift. I want to be clear as a reminder, it was 20% prior to 2024. So 2023 was a 20% match. Then it went down to 5% for COVID relief funds. So we were aware in 2026 it would go.
So the last time you were here, I asked these different questions and I wasn't told that changed. And so I'm kind of shocked that all of a sudden we're finding this out. It's still the Mayo employees ride for free, is that correct?
No, well, Mayo employees are compensated by Mayo. So Mayo pays for every Mayo rider that comes on and we invoice them
But the
monthly.
employee just flashes their badge and they get on the bus. Okay. You talked about big trips. A missed trip, that's a big deal to that person that you miss. If I have to be to work, now you become undependable.
Right.
And basically, I believe that that's what's happening, is that we become undependable. So I'm looking at the numbers, and your 2019 ridership numbers were over 2 million. Okay. So we hit COVID, and everybody says, well, everything's going to fall. We hit COVID. But in 2022, your numbers were 907,000. That's over COVID. And then you had 704. You're falling every single year in ridership. There's no explanation for that to me. Is there one to you?
There are a lot of things to look at, right? And I think you hit one of them on the head. Reliability and frequency do make an impact on people wanting to ride the transit system. And there are multiple things that happen in that space. The removal of the IBM park and ride lot is one of them that impacted that ridership. But through those increased collaborations with Mayo, we've definitely seen an increase from 2024 to 2025 numbers. I know they're not huge, but it is a 20,000 ridership increase between those 2 years.
So from 2022 to 2025, you lost 237,000 trips, and that's just because you lost the IBM lot?
There are a lot of variable factors in that, and I unfortunately don't have that data in front of me, and we don't have the ability to go back and ask each rider why they chose to stop riding the transit system. But
really, shouldn't we? Shouldn't you ask the people? And we lost the Mayo Clinic, the IBM lot, but we put one up at 65th Street or 75th Street?
75th Street.
So we have a new one at 75th Street, so I can't imagine that everybody just left IBM. So I guess where I'm frustrated, and I'm frustrated for a long period of time, and I brought this up last year, and it was, yeah. Now you're coming to us, and we're going to fix a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Last time you were here, your proposed changes were 1.3 million, and this is a huge amount of money that's going to go away. And like I've said in the past, the state is going to have problems, and they're going to pull back on funding. The feds are going to pull back on funding, and we're sitting here with a system that basically is deteriorating and going away. And you're sitting here telling me, well, but we're going to do this. The other problem I have is we have the BRT system coming on. That's a huge investment. That's a $190 million investment. And I'm not hearing you that when you do the rapid bus, whatever you're doing, that they're going to go to those ends, that they're going to go to the new park and ride that we're building at the rec center. And if the IBM one's the same, the Shopko one or the old Shopko goes away, are we just going to lose riders? I mean, I don't see this as being, hey, we're really doing something new. I think you're up here telling us, well, we're going to change the blinds on the house, and we're going to maybe put a new front door on. We need to do something huge. You're down from 2 million riders to 669,000 riders, and you don't have an explanation.
There's not a way to quantify those exact numbers. That we can say the impacts of the system that we're aware of, but also the return from work, like we have work from home to take into consideration. But I will address this point, and I think it's good to be thoughtful of, is we anticipate a high integration between the fixed route and the BRT system. We want people to come to downtown, jump on the BRT and ride up and down. We anticipate having a fixed route stop at West Transit Village. We also anticipate having the ability to be near a BRT stop. So there's a high level of integration on that. And we are fully aware that the success of one is the success of both. If fixed route is successive, there's a high probability Link will be successful. And if Link is successful and there's a high amount of integration with fixed route, we're increasing awareness and knowledge and comfortability with the transit system. So we hope and anticipate individuals will ride the fixed route system as well.
As one of my colleagues always likes to tell me, is that hope is not a plan. We're down from 2022, 237,000 riders. That's not with COVID.
Right.
I mean, this is amazing to me that we're sitting here. We find out today that oh, geez, the share is going to go from 5 to 15%. We knew that last year.
Right.
The council didn't know that.
So I will say that is why we brought the fall service changes, and I believe that was part of the council presentation on why that was necessary to make those. And that was the first major shift to the transit system that has happened in multiple years. And so we've already made those initial steps towards making big shifts and dramatic shifts within the system.
Council President Schubring, if I could just chime in. and
Go
add.
ahead, Mr. Yetzer.
Thank you. Just to your comments there, I certainly hope that nobody takes away from this that we are just changing the window dressing. I mean, the items that are on the screen before you between the operations RFP, the spring service changes, and then a transit development plan, those are opportunities to change really big things that have a really big impact. So I hope that we're prepared to have those conversations, because the things you're bringing up are the exact conversations we are having as well. And we intend to bring those things forward. They do take time. The RFP is out currently. The fall or the spring service changes takes analysis. So I understand the frustration. I acknowledge the frustration. But I don't want to leave here with this sentiment that we're just making small tweaks here and there. We're prepared to make some significant changes to try to address this shortfall.
I brought this up in March. We brought it back in the fall time, and the proposed changes were $1.3 million. That's not a lot of changes.
Understood. And
That's why I bring up window dressing. That's the reason. I mean, this is not something new from me to bring this up, and we're just kind of dancing around it till today. We're going to do the same thing in 6 months. And they're going to say, oh, geez, we need money from the property tax. And I know there's people on the council who do not want property taxes going to the bus system. And I'm one of them.
Councilmember, I think, and I'm going to just pick up on what Councilmember Palmer said. I think that, and you have a tough job, and I know you're new in that job, but the tone of this conversation last time, I think you have got to realize where we are as a council. And so I share some of Councilmember Palmer's frustration on this. This is a hard job, and you got to recognize we're waiting for the meat of this. And I do see radical and innovative thinking on there. Given where we were last time, you can't just tell us you're doing radical and innovative thinking. We want to know what it is. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate your answer to incorporating the fixed route with the BRT. That's the kind of information we need to see. We need to hear transparency on what those discussions are and where we are, and because we all care about this. We all want to see this succeed. And I know you are a breath of fresh air from me. I see that, and but understand where we've been. So with that, Councilmember Miller.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll say that just as staff, I do recognize, and Ms. Fouch, I do hear elements of radical thinking. You mentioned, and I don't know that it hit us enough, of moving from a loop route to a out and back. Because what I was going to say is one of the earlier slides in your presentation talks about 93% of jobs being within a half mile of a transit stop. I think that's the wrong measure. How long does it take somebody to get to a transit stop? How many jobs are within 30 minutes of a transit ride? Because that's the point of how people are making considerations. How long does it take me to get to work? And what are my options? I could drive, I could walk, I could take a bike, I could take the bus. But if that job is within a half mile of the transit stop, I don't think that's really my consideration. Because how long is it going to take me to get there? When does the bus come? And am I going to get on a route and go on a 68-minute journey around the city as a leisurely start to my day? So I think that looking at partnerships, even with the University of Minnesota, they operate the Accessibility Observatory that looks at access to jobs, access to recreational spaces, access period by that time, and how many people, or might we look at mapping that gives us a sense of what people or what areas of the city have access to the amenities of daily life by different modes, including transit. And I think that is a conversation that we're not really having of, is our transit system functioning for daily needs? But again, like moving from a loop system to a two-way, I think is a radical change. And I just want to acknowledge that for you and for my colleagues here, because I do hear that, and I don't want us to just jump over it and say, where do we get to the BRT? I also get the sense, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that we're in this pre-BRT launch planning of what can we do in these fall service changes, spring service changes. We don't have the BRT system up and running for perhaps 18 more months. So that's great, and let's plan for it. But this local match has changed now, and I want to see that radical change around a new spine of high-frequency, fare-free, all-day reliable service that you don't have to pull out an app or know a route schedule to say I could walk to that stop and a bus is going to come. So I think that is not something we can do today, and it takes time. And I am glad to hear that there are collaborations happening. I wonder about collaborations with other partners, not necessarily because they have huge budgets, but Rochester Public Schools has a huge population. The majority of their population cannot drive themselves, and seems like an opportune partnership to understand whether our system could or might not work for one of their highest cost areas after staff, which is transportation. And I think that they could help us understand where people are trying to get to and from, and whether or not, again, if we think of school like a job, I mean, we're having a similar conversation of can people get to where they spend most of their day? And I don't know that we understand whether our system can support, and potentially in a different financial state for the school district, be a potential collaborator. I don't hear any conversation about fares, which I will just acknowledge might not be popular, but is a lever that we're not necessarily considering here. Is $2 the right fare? I don't know. And then we have a comprehensive plan that lays out a primary transportation network. And again, we keep talking about coverage, and our comp plan keeps talking about high frequency access to transportation spines. And I just feel like we're a little out of alignment there. And then finally, I would hope that we're having collaborative conversations about commuter programs, because even if the bus works 95% of days, if you have a situation where you get a call, your kid needs to be picked up from daycare or school, is sick, well, the bus doesn't run as frequently in the middle of the day, and perhaps that person has a bad experience because there's no other resource. And I know that other communities, other metropolitan planning organizations are looking at commuter services that include these guaranteed ride homes. What happens when the bus doesn't work for you? What are the supports that make it easier for you to say, hey, the bus works, and I'm not afraid that if something happens in my day, I won't be able to get there because I took the bus. And I would hope that we're also having these kind of programmatic conversations with ROCOG, with Mayo Clinic, and even as the city of Rochester, who employs a city organization, of making sure that the transit system could work even for our own employees, and what might be the gaps in the service offerings beyond what are the routes, what is the fare, and where do they go, and how long does it take, but what are the other barriers to choosing public transit?
Right. So I'd like to kind of
That's a
address some
lot.
of
Yeah,
these.
thank you.
I hopefully grabbed relevant notes, but we are in conversations with RPS. We're working on collecting the data necessary for us to be able to plot that out. We anticipate that being part of our transit development plan. It allows us to evaluate that and allow a professional to evaluate that in integration with RPS. So those conversations have started. We are sharing data back and forth on a pretty regular basis to see what the feasibility of us providing additional service to them is. In terms of fares, we've had conversations, I guess, internally with the transit team on what that looks like. If we were to increase our standard fixed route fare, we would be the highest cost transit system in the state. But I do think there are other opportunities to look at, and something that the Metro does is they charge 25 cents more for an express route. So if you're choosing to ride a more expensive route, there's a slight increase in what that can be. And when you say 25 cents, it doesn't feel like a lot, but when you're looking at potentially 350 riders a day, that actually jumps about $100,000 or $80,000 of potential revenue that we could generate just by increasing that by 25 cents. And then in terms of commuter programs, those conversations have started. And so I work with our mode shift coordinator, Matt Lynch, a ROCOG representative, Mayo, and Bike MN to talk about opportunities. And those conversations have just started. And we're in the initial mapping phase on where are our needs, what is high cost, high reward, low cost, low reward, and everything in between, and things that we can implement. So in terms of where we stand on some of those collaborative programs, we're started. And hopefully we'll have things that we can implement soon. And so I know in the conversations I've had with some of our partners is, we can't wait a year, we can't wait 2 years for some of these plans to come to full fruition. We have to be able, what are the stopgaps or short implementations that we can make now that can make a big difference?
Okay. Thank you. And I'll just add, and this is not directed to you, but I know this has come up in the past with Mayo Clinic, just acknowledging that they are operating a private transportation system that competes in ridership with our system. And I would love to see them take seriously what their commitment to the city's services are and their own employees as a collaborative partner in this space. And I hope that they see that radical and innovative thinking brings them more to the table as well. Mm-hmm. And then just a minor point on our fare structure is just something I've experienced in a different city I lived in was having a daily maximum fare so that after somebody has ridden a certain amount of time, that automatically guaranteed them that they would not be charged anymore. So if that was 2 round trips a day, so say you hit $4, well, suddenly you can continue to ride, board. Obviously, that requires some software that we probably don't have, but thinking about ways that we make it easier and sort of make the transportation cost a bit more predictable for people because we have monthly fares. But I don't know that we're necessarily there in a system and I think electronic payments were a major step forward. But I do wonder about even just the payment ease and predictability of the cost of how we might think about some programs beyond just every time you get on the bus, here's the standard fare.
Yeah, and I'd like to kind of add to that fare conversation, and I think we need to have a proven, reliable, and efficient service before we can have some really considerable conversations on increasing the fare. It's not fair to increase the fare to our riders as a way to cover the costs of the system.
Councilmember Keene.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, again, it's good now that we are aware. I guess I'm a little surprised. I've been going through some of this stuff with transit, and I was aware of this upcoming change from how we were being funded through MnDOT and FDA. So, I realize what a problem it is. I'm also aware of those rider numbers, and like you say, I don't think you can come down to it's because of the Mayo parking lot or it's because of the IBM parking lot, but all these things and work from home and a plethora of other things that go on got us to where we're at, and that's where we're at. And I think that's the important thing right now. I guess I want to, I'm glad to hear us talking about, like, hey, there's 13 routes that are below our thing that we've got to look at. But I don't take any solace in that. I mean, that means we're getting smaller. That means, this is how people go out of business, by trying to save their way out. And it's not good. I attended the meetings last fall where we were going out to at Riverside, telling people that these routes are going away, and we are losing business by doing that. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing good in this. It might feel more efficient, but it's less usage. Yeah,
and I'd like to add to that, it's looking at those 13 routes, but it's not looking to cut those 13 routes. So it's looking for opportunities. Is there any more overlap between another route? Is there a way to increase frequency, to increase ridership on that route? We fully understand that if we are to cut routes, we are cutting our client base. And we'd be into the same situation and expecting people that aren't current riders to increase exponentially to be able to cut that.
The other point, and I just think it's a point of learning for me, if you would cut like service and like we did in the fall, and the system saves $100,000, do we only save 20,000 of that because we only fund 20%?
Yes, I would say yes. And
Yeah.
I think it's really important too, as we look at those numbers, those are projected over an annual impact of those service changes. So as we've discussed, like as we were discussing those numbers with me and the transit team in the past couple of weeks, I really don't think that's the best way to look at it.
Right.
Because it's anticipating a shift in ridership based and to reach that projection off of the current ridership, but it's also indicating that you're making no other changes for that entire year.
Yeah.
So past that, how would you know what the impact of that ultimately?
But I wanted to bring up that point that if we save this much, we don't get it all, and that's why the looking at the revenue side, the advertising side, things like that are more. I wanted to understand when you show our transit like funds that as an enterprise we have aside, we have 3 businesses. Do the 3 businesses share one fund, or are there 3 separate funds?
They all share one fund,
Okay.
and we'll share one fund. Parking does not share that fund.
Yes,
Parking has their
separate.
own. But the 3 modes do all share that transit fund. And so that's why when you're looking at these numbers, fixed route can generally generate enough revenue to cover the expenses of the others. We're not in that situation right now. Fixed route did generate revenue this year. We're estimating that to be just expenses or the capital that was already planned for.
Okay. I did take note of radical and innovative thinking. And I guess when you're in cost cutting and that doesn't really sound radical and innovative. No, it sounds ugly. So I know Councilmember Miller brought up the partnerships, and you have it in your charts too. Is that where this radical and innovative thinking comes from? Because I feel we've lost some of our riderships to like Responsiveness Mayo was trying to do with its employees that took away from our ridership. Is that what we're talking about there, or is it something totally different?
Some of it's increased collaboration with external partners. I think a lot of it's increased collaboration with internal partners. We are not an island. We're not behind a door. And really what we're looking at is increasing the relationships with the people that are running our transit system. And we are running that, but the people that are driving our riders every day.
Yeah.
I will say this on a personal note, probably the highlight of my year. I know we're only a couple of weeks in, but this afternoon I was crossing Civic Center, take it over here to the government center, and one of the drivers saw me on the other side and waves and opens the door and yells hi to me. And I don't know if that's a relationship that's been there before.
Good.
And so this is how it's all starting on like in a grassroots way to build the confidence of the drivers and up. And maybe that's not radical to most, but it's not radical in the terms of cutting funding. It's radical in the terms of growing relationships.
Okay.
And one of the things I've been impressed upon our current operator, TransDev, is what that looks like in terms of those connections with the staff that they have. Yeah. And one of the hyper focuses that I've asked all of those safety meetings, which they have a monthly safety meeting and all the staff come to them, is to really focus on this is a rider first organization. And I've now been hearing them say this, and I've been answering questions, how do we increase ridership? And the answer is always, you have to increase their confidence in the system. You have to stop missing routes. We have to be on time. We have to be responsible.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that attention. As far as this sort of industry talk, though, I don't want to pretend that I know something about loops versus two ways. And I mean, we have your staff here; let them make those kind of decisions. Mm-hmm. But I guess I do want, from my bigger view here, there's some talk about radical changes coming with BRT. And, probably 14 months from now, it's going to be running, something like that. And then you've got these other contracts going on, not just the advertising, the new operator. All these changes are coming as we try to get into 27 with still having a transit fund and stuff. But I think that's the time for the radical thinking then my focus would be get BRT right first, stabilize our numbers right now. But the radical thinking, I think, comes after BRT is running and successful, and all of a sudden we have this public transit spine that we can now leverage for what our fixed routes could be.
Yeah, and I hear that. There are some changes that are going to have to be made before then, just because of our availability of funds and what that looks like in our system. And I do recognize that any one of these things is not going to get us there. It's a combination of all of them. We're looking at the transit development plan, but that's not going to be our savior. It's not going to bring us to the finish line. But what it is going to do is help us plan what the integration in those potential big shifts that can happen within our fixed route can be and will be once BRT is up and operational.
And just, if I could just in close, I just want to thank your extended team that's here with you. I did go through some of those things last fall, watching how we rolled this out. It's painful stuff. So I think we'll get on the right path here, but we've got a lot of work to do.
I want to pick up on a little bit of what Councilmember Keene talked about, and it does have to do with radical and innovative thinking. I think it's important, and I'm glad you're doing radical and innovative thinking now to capitalize on what we're going to see with BRT. We're going to see a whole bunch of new riders on that route. And what I'd like to hear from your team, not today, but in the next months, is what are you going to be doing to capitalize on that usage to get them to use some of the fixed routes that are on the spokes of the BRT route or near it. And so that's where I want to hear about radical and innovative thinking to maximize the usage here. And I know a couple of my colleagues want to speak again, but I wanted to ask you one more question on maintaining and enhancing high performance routes. You talked about the loop and the two-way and the express routes. Are there other things that you're looking at to enhance those high performance routes?
Yeah, so it could be something as are all of our stops appropriately placed within those express route systems? So really taking a good look at that. Is the frequency appropriate? What if we shifted from 15 minutes to 10 minutes instead? What would that look like on the system? Could it increase ridership? So anything we can do to maintain the riderships and grow the riderships on those routes are the things that we're looking at. Are the hours of operation for that appropriate? One of our express routes starts at 5:10 in the morning, I believe. And so are we hitting the right individuals within that system?
Got it. Thank you. Councilmember Fredericks.
Thank you. Well, congratulations on your new job. It's pretty fun to come under fire right away.
I'm having a great time.
You're doing an impressive job. So good job on that and hanging in there. I just want to know this stuff isn't like directed at you. We're just trying to come up with a solution. So we talked about reliability being a big issue if we're going to build ridership. And would you say right now that our past problems, has it been the bus? Has it been the help? Has it been the management? What has been the reliability issue?
The biggest issue with our I would say the two biggest issues with our reliability are missed trips and on-time performance.
Okay, so what causes the missed trip?
What causes the missed trips? So that is a shortage of drivers. You need a CDL to drive one of our buses. And if we have, it's a flu season, so we did experience a lot of call-offs. And I think our shifts in the fall service changes reduced that number from kind of that outstanding 120 missed trips in October to just 6 in December. And that was, to be honest, those were just accidents. Those were, I accidentally overslept, and so I missed the first 2 trips of the day. Understanding that individuals are humans and accidents happen, would we anticipate that hopefully being 0 in the future? 100%. But that shifted the reduction of the needed amount of drivers to help us run the system that we have right now has dramatically improved that shift in missed routes. And then on-time performance, a lot of we can see a notable difference when construction opens up in an area, especially the construction on Broadway. A lot of our routes go up and down Broadway, and as the lanes opened up, our on-time performance increased.
Okay. How has your electric fleet been running this winter?
So, as of right now, one of our electric fleet buses is in operation. The remainder are not in operation, and that's due, in some situations, to a battery recall. In other situations, the doors are malfunctioning. So we're working with our maintenance team and New Flyer to ensure those buses are back in operation.
Okay, how many, you say one's operational, how many are there?
We have 4.
Okay, so we have reliability issues with the electric buses. And are we going down the road of converting our whole fleet to electric?
No.
Just
Current-
go ahead.
Yeah, currently, right now, in the CIP that I showed you, there is a 0 purchase of electric buses within that CIP budget.
Okay, and how about the bus rapid transit line? Is that gonna be all electric, or is there gonna be diesel involved in that as well?
Right now, it is 100% electric fleet, and that's through an agreement with both our partners in Mayo, our partners in DMC. It's also currently how the grant reads from FTA and MnDOT. We are actually going to New Flyer tomorrow to look at their facilities and create more of those connections to impress upon them the importance of the functionality of that fleet.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say too then, correct me if I'm wrong, bus rapid transit is gonna be funded exclusively through those funding sources. No property taxes will be being used on that line. We're talking the already existing lines that are using more reliable buses is where the property tax we're looking at funding out of locally. Cause I told constituents for the last 2 years that property taxes don't go towards running our bus lines, and now we're flipping that script a bit, so that's, no?
Yeah.
Who wants to take this?
Your first shot, others can chime in.
Mr. Yetzer, go ahead.
Thanks, Council President. No, our system is not tapping into property tax dollars.
Okay.
The deficit that we are showing this year, we have reserves that can cover that.
Where does the
deficit.
reserves come from?
Excess revenue
Gotcha.
from previous years.
Perfect. I just want to clear that up because as a person sitting at home watching this or is written on it, you know, you hear property taxes, you assume that bucket comes from, or you hear taxes, period. You know, either we're paying it federally, we're paying it state, or we're paying it locally, whether it be property or such. So that's what I just want to be clear on that, because if I'm starting to get confused on that,
Yeah,
you know.
I'm glad you asked the question so we could clearly answer that.
Yes.
The goal is, the system has been, and the goal is to have it continue to be self-sustainable
okay, with federal and state aid,
and local share
right?
through revenue sources like buying bus passes, advertising, those sorts of things.
Thank you.
And I will say that federal and local share is how the vast majority, if not, I don't want to say 100%, but most public transportation systems are that same percentage.
I'm just glad that you proved my information. I told people accurate.
Well, good. Well, good.
Selfishly.
And I just to expand upon that, and you know, hopefully dispel any misinformation when it comes to the payment of the BRT system. We all. If I get this incorrect, I'll let Cindy jump in. But we do have an agreement with Mayo to cover the operations costs, which would be considered our local share. And so we'd still be pursuing grant funding, as I noted in the previous slide, to cover the operations and capital for that. But then we'd be utilizing the Mayo agreement dollars for the local share. So in terms of, is this coming again, like where is it really fare free? Where are those dollars coming from? Those dollars are coming from the Mayo agreement to cover the local cost share.
Okay. In closing, then, I just want to make sure going forward, and you're doing a great job, by the way, in your beginning stages of this new chapter. But I want to make sure that the boots on the ground were getting their voice heard, whether it be the drivers, because they're out there every day seeing the things that they're being heard well, and same with our mechanics, listening to what they have to say about reliability issues and such. They know what's going on, and they're the people that are in it, around it every single day.
And I can't agree more. And I guess I could invite up our ATU president as well. But one of the things is I attend the safety meetings every month. And in those meetings, I collect anything that we need to look at. And so a great example of that right now is the turn light on 16th Ave and 2nd Street. It's not long enough to accommodate the buses to turn right. and pedestrians to walk across there. And there is a high amount of pedestrian traffic there. So I'm currently working with our transportation engineer to retime that light so that those buses can make that turn and be on time. They brought that request up to me, and that allowed me to make that connection internally. So a lot of it's breaking down those barriers.
Thank you.
Councilmember Doring.
Thanks. Thanks for remembering my name just for a second.
I was bypassing Councilmember Palmer, who asked first, but you haven't spoken yet.
It's okay, and I won't go long. I really think a narrative that needs to be shared publicly is the improvement in reliability. And I'm wondering what your team is doing to share that story publicly.
That's a great question. And we've already started the conversations with our communications team and what it looks like, what our next year looks like. Do I think it's billboards? Do I think it's wrapping our own buses? Do we think, no. I think it's creating those personal connections, opportunities that we can to do like Safe City Nights or attend other events and table and interact with the public and really share that message of reliability. Also, I'm really impressed with our CAT committee, and they've been asking, how can we advocate? What do you want us to tell the public about our transit system? And those are the things that we're giving them and kind of fueling them with so they can be advocates for the transit system out in the public.
That's good to hear. I would encourage you to even think further out of the box, right? So the constituents that I talk to who are no longer writing RPT, it's based on reliability, right? So they are willing to spend to take an Uber, which is exponentially more expensive to get home than writing RPT, and they're making that choice simply because they do not have trust that the system runs on time and is predictable. So, I would encourage your team to spend a little more time focusing on how to share that narrative publicly. And then you had mentioned that part of the reliability issue was kind of the lack of drivers. I'm wondering what we're doing as a city entity to retain drivers. If we're putting that on the operator, if we are taking responsibility to that as Rochester Public Transportation. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone that's interested, that's actually the presentation that TransDev will be giving to the CAT committee next month. So we have I'll just backtrack a little bit. CAT committee used to meet quarterly. We now meet monthly on the second Thursday of every month at 5 p.m. in 104. And we're providing a program for each one of those to help promote those things. And the committee requested TransDev to come in and give a presentation on driver recruitment and retention. And so a lot of it has to do with what do those relationships look like. I don't think it's a misplaced statement to say that if you don't enjoy the people you work for, you don't enjoy where you work. And so working with TransDev to ensure through our current contract and through our future contract, the city has final approval on people that get put into those management positions. So working collaboratively with our partners to ensure that the right person is in the right place and not just hiring somebody to fill that role. And truthfully, it's been a lot of difficult conversations and a lot of conversations that are probably past due, but how can we work better together we're both running businesses, right? They're running a business and we're running a business, and we both need to be positive in the end. But a lot of it is just ensuring that the relationships are good and true. Because again, in the end, we're all just people and they have a choice to work where they want to work. But that's why we've been more present. And I am a firm advocate. I say, like, I'm going to take these doors down, or we have mirrored film on some of the glass. And I was like, I'm taking this down because that there's no separation between our TransDev operators and city staff in my mind.
Okay, and one final question. I know that we're going to see some significant changes happen to a large number of routes, right? When can we expect to see that plan, and how quickly is that plan going to be communicated to riders?
That's a great question. So next week, me and the transit staff will be riding those low-performing routes and having conversations with our riders. Why do you ride this route? What are the reasons that you sometimes choose not to? What are some ideas that you have? What are some shifts that we can make in the system? So we're going to be riding the system with our riders and really getting that one-on-one feedback. We'll be putting out a traditional survey to accommodate that as well. So we're not only saying if we interacted with you on the bus, that's the only way you can give us input. But that is step one, and we'll be doing that for 2 weeks. And then we'll be able to put together a plan. And we do have kind of the basis, as I outlined on that previous slide, of what are we looking at. So that allowed us to narrow in on those 13 routes and really look at what those potential shifts and changes can be.
Yeah, I'm just worried about, and I appreciate that, and it sounds like it's proactive, right? I'm just concerned about citizens who use RPT as their primary mode of transportation and them having adequate amounts of time to adjust to a new reality.
Yeah. And I guess I'll even add to that, one of the biggest complaints we currently get about our system that's not reliability or on-time performance, it's our transit guides and our transit books. And so we will be converting back to a booklet or some version of that and not into the quadrant system, which I do understand. And we understand, whenever you make a big change, you have to give it an opportunity for adoption. And it's not being well received. And so we'll be shifting back to a more user-friendly approach for that.
Councilmember Palmer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doring, for bringing that up. I think advertising your strengths is be a good idea. I know when I've ridden the bus, it's clean, it's safe, it's nice to ride the bus, and that's nice to say. It's interesting, Mr. Miller brought up lowering fees or figure out where the fares are. Right now, 2/3 of the riders in Mayo Clinic riders pay nothing to ride the bus. And so it escapes me how you can get less than zero. But I mean, if you've got people riding a bus for zero, making that decision, that's pretty good. And, Mayo Clinic has made that available to us. And so I think that they need to be thanked. And I would think that what I've been told is one of the reasons they run such a big system is our dependability problem. And that's what I've been told, and you're shaking your head yes. The other idea I have is you have 237,000 riders you've lost in the last 4 years. You might want to figure out who they are and why aren't they back. Mm-hmm. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
Do you, since Councilmember Palmer brought it up, do you have any insight that you can give us on the conversations that you're having with Mayo Clinic and moving forward?
Yeah, I think they're very positive. They're very focused on us having a proof of reliability. So we're looking at the potential to work with them and partner with them. We are thoughtful of their current contracts and responsibilities, but where are there opportunities that we can show Mayo that we can provide the service that they need. And so those are what the conversations are revolving around, and they are moving forward and not only show them that we can provide the service that they need, but potentially provide it at a rate that's more affordable than what they're paying currently.
And can you spell out that on the fixed routes, Councilmember Palmer said they're paying nothing, but Mayo Clinic is paying the city, and what is that model?
Yeah, so if a Mayo employee gets on one of our fixed route system, they show the badge to the driver, and our system is called Equans, and they have a number pad, and they hit the number associated with Mayo ridership. At the end of every month, we pull those numbers and invoice Mayo directly. So each one of those rides is paid by Mayo. And it is a shift. If you were familiar with the Mayo system previously, they purchased passes for some of their riders. And so this alleviates that need to kind of transition passes back and forth between the organizations and allows us to just be able to punch that number.
Councilmember Doring.
The mayor has her hand up as well, but is Mayo Clinic paying full fare for each ride?
They are currently paying a reduced fare. And so we pay $2 a ride for our fixed route traditional service. Mayo Clinic pays $1.80 a ride.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Norton?
Just quickly, I want to say this has been, I feel good. I really want to just say thank you for what you're doing stepping in to a difficult role at a very difficult time. I know I'm watching the faces around the room, and I'm seeing appreciation for the change and the work that you're doing, and so I just want to acknowledge that. I think the things that I would have said have been said, and that the people that I talk to, it is about reliability. And I cringe when I hear we have to cut routes because those are riders. And when I've ridden the bus, and I do the ride thing every year and, get to meet my neighbors, chat with them, there are people who do not have any other way to work. And so the reliability is vital, not only to get people to their jobs and their daily living things that they have to have in a way that they can afford. But yeah, I guess I just want to say thank you. Keep up the good work. Keep the relationships. It is about people and relationships, and it sounds like you're breaking through to that, and that was very necessary. So
Thank
good
you.
luck.
And I'd like to add, and it's a difficult conversation that I've had multiple times with my team. We look at these numbers. We look at 100,000 rides, and each one of those numbers is a person. And we are fully reflective of, we look at 8 boardings an hour and what that looks like, but those are 8 people that got on that hour. And I will even add that it is a section that we added into the introduction of the RFP, that it is so important that these aren't just numbers or dollars, that these are humans that are getting to and from their day.
Thank you. And just one last thing, keep up the radical and innovative thinking. We like it. And just be transparent with us, though,
We will.
as well. So thanks.
Thank you.
Administrator Zelms, what is our study session schedule look like?
Well, continuing on the vein of radical and innovative thinking, your next study session is we are finalizing a location, unless magically someone tells me it's been finalized, for city council training. So that will be an experience with Bethany von Steinberg's and Strengths in Leadership. So we will, as soon as possible, let you know where that's going to be. I did just want to also share that we do have set up behind the clerks an idea for if you wanted to radically get around a table to have future study sessions. We do think that the setup in the annex to the council chambers would be a good one. We would flip the chairs a bit so that there could still be room for the community to attend and hear you. It would be recorded by an OWL camera that would be in the middle, so it would be recorded and then uploaded. But just something to think about. So if you have a moment, if you wanted to take a look, provide us some feedback. I've gotten a little bit of feedback from folks, but if that's something that you're interested in, we also are talking on February 9th about your council rules of procedure and code of conduct. So a great opportunity to say, maybe we do that around the table. So if that's something that I know that we've been interested in that, but also some council members have vacillated between that. So if it's something you're interested in, it would be helpful to get your feedback and let us know if that would work for you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, we are adjourned.
Thank you.